damp cloth dipped in some clean ash, and that's the cause of a chimney fire. It depends how you're using the stove, what wood you're burning. In the past, wasn't so much the case. The main top tip for getting the most heat out of a log burner from me is
So let's change gears for the final time, and now let's talk about some of the most commonly asked questions about maintenance and performance. So what's the best way to maintain a log burner to ensure that it lasts for years, if not decades?
So one good tip with a stove is in the summer when you're not using it, you can leave the air control just open a little bit on the stove, so you're getting a through flow of air through that chimney so that damp doesn't build up in the stove or the chimney, so you're letting air go up through it. Nice and easy to do, and you only have to do it once. Then you've got ash building up in the stove. For a wood burner only, a little bit of ash isn't a bad thing. You can leave an inch or two in there. It acts as an insulating layer and can actually make the fire burn better. So when you clean it out, you don't have to fully clean the thing out. You can leave some ash in there if you want. For a multi-fuel stove that you are burning coal on, however, you want to keep that grate free of ash, because if ash blocks that grate up, it can get too hot and you'll very quickly burn it out. And then you'll be spending money on new bits for the stove, plus your coal won't burn that well. So you won't be getting the best out of it. Sometimes you might need to clean the glass of the stove, and you can buy all sorts of products to do that. But actually, just a damp cloth dipped in some clean ash. Make sure you don't get any of the little gritty bits of ash, just the grey clean ash, and circular motions around the window of the stove. Make sure it's not hot. Has to be cold to start with. That will get rid of any deposits on that window, and that's for free. You want to keep your chimney swept. It's obviously the engine of the stove, so you need it to be nice and clear. Also, if you don't sweep it for ages and ages and your stove's running badly, especially, you can get deposits in there and tar building up, and that's the cause of a chimney fire, so you don't want to leave that. You can get your stove swept by a professional chimney sweep, and they'll also be well placed to give you other advice around how you're using the stove as well, and how many deposits are coming down. Personally, I sweep the chimney myself, and I've got a cordless drill, nylon rods, and you push them up the chimney, rotate. I've got a twin wall chimney, so it's a very simple job for me to do, and very easy. My stove makes maybe a handful of ash comes out of the chimney, and I sweep that twice a year. But there is no actual how many times should I sweep a chimney. It depends how you're using the stove, what wood you're burning, how often you're using it. So sweep it, see what comes out, and that will inform you as to the frequency of sweeping that you need. Some other things you can do for your stove is you can check that if it's got a grate, check that the grate's in good working order. If it's on the fire bricks, check that they're intact. So a little crack in a fire brick, but where they're, however, still in place and protecting the metal behind, isn't anything to particularly worry about. But if you're seeing bare metal through the fire brick, then think about replacing that. The seals around the door, glass and ash pan door, they can need replacing, and a top tip is to close the door on a bit of paper and then try and pull it out. If it pulls out dead easily, then you either need to adjust the door like you would on a window to get the seal working better. You may be able to just tweak it, or you replace that rope. It's quite a simple operation. You might not need to get a professional to do that. You're just taking the rope out, cleaning the groove, applying a glue and putting the new rope in, then leaving a weight on it or leaving it upside down on a surface to have its own weight push that rope down. So that's some typical maintenance tasks. It's important to clean it. A stove has one or two baffles. So if you've got the firebox here with the wood burning, you'll have an angled plate above, which is called the baffle, and often you'll have a secondary baffle up here like that, so that the flue gases are taking this long circuitous route, which is helping us get more heat out of the wood, which is increasing the efficiency of the stove. But you can get deposits that build up on these baffles here, so that's a thing to clean out every so often. Keep an eye on. If there's stuff building up there, then do it a bit more often. If there's not, then don't.
So if you've had a log burner for a long time, or you've moved into a property that actually has got one, how do you know whether that log burner needs replacing?
How do you know whether the log burner needs replacing? Well, it would be operating badly. So assuming you know how to use a stove and are familiar with them, I'd say give it a look, give it a clean, inspect the bits, look at those baffles like I just mentioned, make sure the chimney's well swept. Make sure the air supply to it is sufficient and working. If it's got a direct air duct, make sure that has a clear pathway outside, it's not blocked outside or anything. Then use it and see what happens. If you're not so familiar with stoves, then I think it's worth asking someone who is, and you may well have a friend or neighbour who can help you with that. And ask some advice. If it's something, you may have a notice plate for the installation of the stove, and that may tell you who supplied it or who put it in, and then you could ask those people for advice. Typically, the notice plate would be by your electricity consumer unit or near the stop tap for your water. Knowing whether you need to replace a stove or not is more a decision about how expensive it might be to repair it, because, as I've mentioned, they're really repairable. So even if the body of a stove has a slight crack in it, you can still get it welded up, but it might just be quite expensive. If that stove has been really abused, you may find that sometimes the whole side of a whole stove can be bent and warped right out, and the grate can be burnt through. And at that point, you're probably this thing has just been driven to death, and you're gonna just look to replace that. If it's just a matter of it needs a bit of glass and some rope and a buff up and a fresh spray or a fresh polish, then I don't see any reason why not to sort of renovate it. Essentially, if you're wanting to burn, if it's a multi-fuel stove with quite a small firebox, and you're wanting to actually just burn wood now and more properly heat the room, or if you've discovered that it's too small for the room, then there are reasons why you might want to replace it. But a stove is a very repairable item, so it's more choice as to whether you're going to repair that or not.
So apart from the obvious signs, then, if you're unsure, are there any telltale signs that the log burner isn't actually operating efficiently?
So one telltale sign is a whole load of black deposits inside the stove, which is unburnt fuel. That means something's not working as it should. That could be a sign that you're not using the stove very well, and that you should maybe read up how the controls work best. But it could also be a sign that there's air getting in somewhere else, and that you can't control, or that your chimney has an incredibly strong draw, say, and is drawing too much air into that stove, or that your wood is wet, and that, again, that's another reason why it might not burn well. You may look at the glass on the stove and you may see sort of black marks on one side of that glass. That would indicate that that bit of the rope isn't working very well. It's not sealing well to the body of the stove. So that's a telltale sign. It should always have a baffle in it. So where the firebox is, where you're burning the wood, there'll be an angled plate of some sort above that firebox, unless someone's taken it out or it's burnt out and they've taken it out. So that's a thing. You can just look to see if there is one of those. Modern stoves do have these multiple baffles, and that does mean that the chimney has to work especially well for a modern stove. It has to suck hard on that stove, which in the past wasn't so much the case. That's a difference between the modern and old stoves that I missed out earlier. So someone may have had a really old stove, which essentially chucks a load of heat straight up the chimney because there's nothing in the way of it and the chimney. Then they go and install a new stove and they go, "Oh, it's rubbish. It's just not sucking as that well. These new stoves are rubbish." But in actual fact, the thing that was rubbish is still their chimney because it always was rubbish. So that's another sort of big difference between the two. Obviously, if it's a boiler stove and it does central heating for you, you may see a whole load of rust coming off some of the tappings, or you may find that air is leaking into the system if there's a crack in that boiler somewhere, something like that. That would be a sign that it needs replacing. And you may find corrosion in the chimney, inside or out, if too much, say they haven't put a rain cap on top and just moisture's been coming down the whole time and just eroding the whole thing. That's another sign it needs replacing. If however the stove's just a bit dirty or rusty or something like that and isn't looking fully black and polished, and that's not a sign that you need to replace it necessarily. That can very easily be remedied.
So we've touched on gaskets and we've touched on fire bricks. Now, how often should they be replaced? Or is it just a matter of, if the actual fire bricks are cracked, that gives you the indication that it's time to change? Or should you be changing them more frequently?
Yeah, it's replacing the items in perishable items in a stove is really just changing them when they need it. It's not like changing the oil filter in a car at MOT or whatever. No, it's does it need it? Are there cracks in the fire bricks? Have they fallen to bits? Is the grate warped or burnt away? Has the glass got a crack in it? And then I mentioned closing a bit of paper on the door on a bit of paper to see if that fire rope is still making a good seal. So yeah, just check it, and if it needs replacing, replace it. But if not, carry on.
So are there any seasonal maintenance tips that you should be doing to prepare your log burner for the heating season?
Definitely getting your chimney swept is the main top tip, and it's also got a safety consideration. Then you can check that if there's a direct air supply, check that that's got free passage of air going to it, that the vent outside is okay. Give your stove a clean out inside, make sure that's all ready. Make sure you've got a supply of really nice dry wood ready to burn, and decent kindling to hand. If it's a boiler model, central heating model, then you can check some of the safety features. So for example, you may have a valve that puts cold mains water through a coil in the boiler. In the event that it's overheating, that typically has a red button on top that you can press just to make sure that water is still flowing through and will work if it starts overheating. If it's got for some stoves, we supply an automatic control panel like a computer. Again, that's got things like overheat protection, so if it's getting too hot, it starts shutting it down. So you can get the probe for that. If it's a boiler model, put it in some boiling water and check that the air valve, air damper is actually shutting that stove down. Check that that's still working.
So as the last question, what are Sune's top tips for getting the most heat output out of a log burner?
The main top tip for getting the most heat out of a log burner for me is make sure your wood is really decent, because you can have as fancy a stove as you like, and if you put rubbish fuel into it, it will be rubbish. Also, buying wet wood is a rip-off, because you're spending money on water, and then you're spending all the available heat in that fuel to evaporate that water off instead of heating you up. It's also illegal to supply small quantities of non-dry, unseasoned wood. It has to be Woodsure ready to burn certified wood. So that's another thing to look at. Another top tip for getting more heat out of your stove is to use the air controls properly. Become familiar with how you use them, how you should use them for refueling and how for lighting, and then how you should regulate the stove as it's burning. That will keep it operating a bit more efficiently. Or consider an automatic controller if you can't be bothered sitting there adjusting the air throughout the burning cycle. That's what I do, because frankly I haven't got the time. I'm running around doing other things that I actually want to do. My highest aspiration isn't to constantly control the stove, although it is for some people, I'm sure. You could also get stove fans. So that's a fan that you sit on top of the stove, and it will use the heat from the stove to either make an electrical current, or sometimes you get really interesting fans called Stirling engine fans that have their own little engine with the driven by expanding air. They're quite fascinating. But they'll drive the blades of the fan round and push hot air, blow that hot air into your room. So if your stove's in a little recess in a fireplace opening, that can be a really good solution to blow that hot air out.
And there you have it. A huge thank you to Sune Nightingale from Firepower for sharing his knowledge and insights with us today. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more tips and insights on home heating and beyond. Until next time, stay warm and cozy. Goodbye.